I noticed the reflection before I noticed the person. That was what made the entire experience so difficult to explain afterward. If I had seen someone standing in my backyard at 2 in the morning, I could have called the police and moved on with my life. Instead, I saw a reflection in my kitchen window of somebody who wasn't there. I was washing a glass before bed when I glanced up and caught sight of a figure standing near the fence behind my house. The image appeared clearly in the dark glass. A person, motionless, watching the house. I turned around immediately. The backyard was empty. When I looked back at the window, the reflection was gone. I stood there for several minutes trying to convince myself it had been a trick of the light. The problem was that there weren't any lights. My backyard was completely dark. There should not be any reflection at all. I lived alone at the time in a small rental house on the edge of town. The neighborhood was quiet, surrounded by empty fields and patches of woodland. Most nights were peaceful. Looking back now, I think that's why the experience affected me so deeply. Strange things feel much stranger when they happen in ordinary places. If you live in an old mansion with a creepy reputation, your imagination expects unusual events. My house wasn't like that. It was normal, ordinary, forgettable. The kind of place nobody would ever tell stories about. Yet after that night, I stopped feeling comfortable there. For the next week, I found myself checking windows constantly. Every reflection seemed suspicious. Every shadow felt slightly wrong. Nothing happened. Life continued normally. I went to work, paid bills, watched television. The memory slowly faded. Then I heard the knocking. It happened exactly at 3:12 in the morning. 3 slow knocks against my front door. Not loud. Not urgent, just deliberate. I woke immediately because the sound felt unusual. Most people knock quickly. These knocks were evenly spaced, almost patient. I checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. The knocking came again. 3 more taps. I climbed out of bed and looked through the peephole. Nobody stood outside. The porch was empty. I opened the door anyway. The street beyond appeared silent. No cars, no pedestrians, nothing. I returned to bed and convinced myself somebody had been playing a prank. The following night, it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks, same empty porch. The third night, the knocking stopped completely. What replaced it was worse. Around 3 in the morning, I began hearing footsteps outside my bedroom window. Slow footsteps, moving through the grass, back and forth, back and forth. The sound continued for nearly 20 minutes. I finally worked up the courage to look outside. The yard was empty, yet the footsteps continued. I could hear them clearly, moving through the darkness where nobody stood. By then I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. I didn't believe anything supernatural was happening. But I knew the situation wasn't normal. I installed motion cameras around the property. 4 cameras covered every angle of the house. The system recorded continuously. For several days, nothing happened. Then one evening, I reviewed footage from the previous night and found something unusual. At 3:12 a.m., all 4 cameras briefly lost signal for exactly 20 seconds. Every camera failed simultaneously. Then they returned to normal. No explanation appeared in the logs. No power outage had occurred. The system simply stopped recording. 20 seconds. That was all. The next night, the same thing happened. Same time, same duration. I started checking footage obsessively. Each night revealed the same gap. 20 seconds missing, always at 3:12, always simultaneously. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear. I decided to stay awake and watch the cameras live. At 3:11 a.m., everything appeared normal. The driveway was empty. The backyard was empty. The porch was empty. Then the screens froze. 20 seconds passed. When the images returned, nothing appeared different. Yet I noticed something strange. My kitchen light was on. I distinctly remembered turning it off before sitting down. Somehow it was illuminated. I walked into the kitchen immediately. The room looked normal. Nothing seemed disturbed. Then I noticed a glass sitting beside the sink. A glass I hadn't used. Water still clung to the inside surface. Somebody had washed it. I lived alone. I wish I could say that was the moment I left the house. Instead, I stayed. Fear does strange things to people. Part of me wanted answers more than safety. Over the following weeks, small inconsistencies appeared throughout the house. Objects shifted locations. Doors stood partially open after I remembered closing them. Lights occasionally switched on by themselves. None of it was dramatic enough to prove anything. Every event had a reasonable explanation. Yet the explanations kept piling up. One afternoon, I found a dining chair positioned directly in front of my bedroom door. I never moved furniture. Another morning, I discovered every kitchen cabinet slightly open. Another night, I woke to find the television displaying static, despite being unplugged. Each incident felt insignificant on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Something seemed to be interacting with the house while I slept. Then I noticed the photographs. I kept several framed family pictures in the hallway. One evening, I walked past them and felt a sudden sense that something had changed. It took me nearly 10 minutes to identify it. In one photograph, my younger sister appeared to be looking slightly toward the camera. Now she seemed to be looking somewhere else. The difference was subtle, tiny. Yet once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. I examined every photograph carefully. Nothing else appeared unusual. I eventually convinced myself memory was playing tricks on me. Then another photograph changed. This time I was certain. My father had been smiling in the image. Now his expression looked neutral. Not angry, not sad, just different. I removed every photograph from the wall and stored them in a drawer. Something about them made me uncomfortable. Around that time, my sleep deteriorated. Every night I woke between 3 and 4 in the morning. Sometimes I heard movement in the hallway. Sometimes I heard whispers too faint to understand. Sometimes I heard nothing at all. Yet the feeling remained. The sensation that somebody else occupied the house. Not physically, just somehow present. One rainy evening, my neighbor stopped me while I was collecting mail. He pointed toward my house. "Who's been staying with you?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. I told him nobody was staying with me. He frowned. "I've seen someone standing in the front window several nights this week." My heart immediately sank. I asked him to describe the person. He hesitated. Hard to say, they just stand there. That answer bothered me deeply because I rarely used the front room. Nobody should have been standing in that window. I reviewed camera footage again. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. 3 nights later, I woke to find my bedroom door open. I always slept with it closed. The hallway beyond looked dark and empty. Then I noticed something at the far end. A shadow. Not a person. Just darkness that seemed slightly darker than everything around it. The shape remained motionless. I blinked. It vanished. Sleep deprivation can create convincing illusions. I knew that. Yet the experience felt real enough that I left every light in the house on until sunrise. Weeks passed. The strange activity continued without escalating. That consistency somehow made it worse. If things had become dramatically frightening, I would have left. Instead, the events remained small, manageable, easy to dismiss individually. Then I found the notebook. It appeared inside a kitchen drawer I rarely opened. The notebook was old, worn, unfamiliar. The first page contained a list of dates, hundreds of them, decades worth. Every date corresponded to somebody having lived in my house. Some names were included, others weren't. The handwriting changed throughout the notebook, as though multiple people had contributed over many years. Most entries were brief, observations, notes, questions. One sentence appeared repeatedly: "Do not acknowledge it." The phrase showed up dozens of times. Different handwriting, different years, same warning. I spent the entire night reading. According to the notebook, previous occupants experienced identical events: knocking at 312, missing camera footage, moving objects, changes in photographs. The entries stretched back nearly 40 years. The final page contained the most recent note. Only 3 words. It remembers faces. I left the house the following morning and stayed in a hotel. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. No knocking, no footsteps, no whispers. The experience should have ended there. Instead, something followed me. On the second night at the hotel, I noticed a reflection in the bathroom mirror. Somebody stood behind me. I spun around instantly. Nobody was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone. My stomach dropped. Whatever had been happening wasn't connected to the house, or at least not entirely. I moved out, permanently the following week. New apartment, new neighborhood, new city. For a while, life returned to normal. Months passed without incident. Then one evening I received an email from an unfamiliar address. No subject line, no message, only a photograph attached. The image showed my old house, taken at night. A figure stood inside the front window, watching the camera. I deleted the email immediately. The next day it returned. Same photograph, different sender. Over the next year, I received the image 7 times. Always from different addresses, always without explanation. I never replied. Eventually, the email stopped. Yet every now and then, usually around 3:12 in the morning, I wake unexpectedly. The room feels unusually quiet. I find myself looking toward windows without understanding why. Most nights, nothing is there, just darkness. But once, about 6 months ago, I glanced toward my bedroom mirror and noticed something strange. A reflection standing near the doorway. Not detailed enough to identify, just a shape, motionless, watching. When I turned around, the doorway was empty. I haven't seen it since. At least I don't think I have. The problem with experiences like these is that certainty slowly disappears. You begin questioning memories, observations, even common sense. Maybe the notebook never existed. Maybe the photographs never changed. Maybe the emails came from a prankster. Every explanation sounds reasonable until I remember one final detail. A detail I never tell people because it sounds impossible. Before moving out, I compared old property records against the notebook's dates. Every recorded occupant eventually left the house. Every single one, except one name. One person remained listed across multiple decades. The same name appeared again and again despite ownership records changing repeatedly. I assumed it was a clerical error until I searched local archives. The name belonged to somebody who had supposedly lived there nearly 70 years ago. There were no photographs, no relatives, no official records beyond a few references. Yet the notebook described that person as though they never truly left. The final entry beside the name contained only a short note, written decades earlier. If you see it in a reflection, it has already seen you. Sometimes I think about that sentence late at night, especially when I catch my own reflection unexpectedly in dark windows or mirrors. And every once in a while, just for a fraction of a second, I get the uncomfortable feeling that there is someone standing slightly behind me in the glass. Not close enough to touch, not close enough to identify, just close enough to be remembered.